So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our winner, Dr. William Carrigan from the History Department.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I am honored to be here. It's quite a pleasure. It's fantastic to see so many friends and family here, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you my, of course, hypothetical last lecture, because I hope to give many more. I want to thank the Student Government Association and Tom and everyone who helped put this together and is recording it and doing all the other kinds of stuff. I do urge all of you, if you have not yet watched Randy Pausch's last lecture or read his book, both are really worth your time, and I mined them for this talk myself. Of course, as I've already mentioned, I'm alive and well. I am not indeed, I'm not dying. In fact, I feel like I'm actually, well, in many ways I feel I'm at the peak of my career. I feel I chose a career wisely. As an historian, as one gets older, I actually think that it's actually, one gets wiser, knows more. I feel like I'm a better historian now than I was 10 years ago. And so I feel like I'm not at all near the end. I feel like I'm really living a great life, and so I'm happy to be there instead of dying. I am going to talk about achieving my dreams, and these are some of the dreams that kind of came to me. I won't say they all came all at one time, but say by the time I was a teenager, these are some of the kind of key things that I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to travel and see the world, and I wanted to have a family. And I'll talk about those later on. But the first thing I am going to talk about is that even though I'm not dying now, I almost did die in 1987. When I was 16 years old, I was in a car accident. I broke every bone in the left side of my body. I had internal injuries and was bleeding. In fact, a priest read me my last rites. For those of you who aren't Catholic, that is very bad. They do not believe you are going to make it. And I had emergency surgery. They told my parents the surgery could kill him, but if we don't do the surgery, he'll definitely be dead in the morning. And so they did exploratory surgery, and they found the organs that were ruptured. They fixed them. And I'm scheduled for another such surgery. They said 99 years in the future. So if I make it to 115, I have to have another open surgery. But anyway, it was a really bad car accident. My brother was in the car with me. He went into a coma. He was completely comatose for 2 weeks. He was semi-comatose for 6 months. My friend Calvin, he had a significant concussion. And this is the story that appeared in the paper, and that's my car. Some people who hear this story want to know how it happened, and so I'll tell you how it happened. I was picking up my friend Calvin. Calvin, he lived in a trailer house. I picked up a couple of my friends in the morning on the way to school. I picked up Calvin. He was in the back. My brother was in the passenger seat, and I had to turn left to go pick up my other friend, Keith. And I saw this truck coming, and I looked the other way, and it's clear, and I said, I can make it in front of the truck. And so I spun out, but he was coming faster than I thought, so I spun out, but my tire spun on the gravel. Everything was still good. Got out into my lane, but the only problem was that the truck thought that I was turning right instead of turning left. So the truck got into the left lane to pass the person he thought was going right, but I wasn't going right, I was going left, so we were in the same lane. I saw this, I remember everything up until right before he hit me. I saw this and I said, this is not going to be good. And I turned the car, I went like this, and I tried to go into the ditch. But he hit me right in the driver's side door and pushed the car, no pre-impact skid marks, he pushed the car for a football field. The jaws of life had to be used to get me out of there. It was a very bad thing. And I woke up, I don't remember the impact, I don't remember being pushed. I remember waking up, not being able to see. I had to take my fingers and remove the blood which had caked over my eyes, so I couldn't open my eyes, and I removed the blood. I didn't feel any pain, totally in shock. I didn't feel any pain. I was really worried about my brother, who was totally non-responsive. And there were some surreal things about it. One was the guy from the truck. He was running around both the truck and my car going, my truck, my truck. And the other thing is that we were heading to the Baptist church, Baptist hospital, which was closer, and then they discovered the St. Jude cross on my brother, and they're like, we got to go to the Catholic hospital. So I'm like, they're like, okay, we got to go to the longer away hospital because they're Catholic if they're going to die. Anyway, so I just remember thinking, this is really strange. These are the kind of memories I have of this, but it was a very important moment in my life for obvious reasons. I had a second chance. Most people do not get to have this experience, and in my opinion, I would not change it for the world. Who I am today is definitely formed by the fact that I had a long time of recovery. I was in a hospital for a long time. My injuries were so substantial, they couldn't do any additional surgery. So like all of my bones that were broken, they couldn't do any surgeries or anything on those bones. They just had to put me into a hospital bed and restrain me from moving, so they just healed that way. So instead of doing casts and stuff, I just couldn't leave the hospital. So I was in the hospital for a long time. I dropped down to about 70 pounds. They could put your fist inside the back of my shoulder blade. I looked like I was like, at that time, there was like people in Ethiopia were starving. I looked exactly like them. I could only be fed intravenously. Only thing I could consume were ice chips, which I thought were like the greatest thing in the world. Like I got an ice chip, and it was like, oh my God, this is a great thing. So it was a very difficult time. I was so wounded. I was so hurt. I couldn't even watch television. They had television. I could only watch it for like 5 minutes, and then I would just get totally exhausted from watching television. And so, but what I could do is I couldn't sleep all the time. I probably slept a ton of hours, but when I wasn't sleeping, I was thinking about my life. And anyway, a lot of kind of the decisions about my life, I think, at least in my mind now, come from this kind of very important turning point in my life. So most of my lecture is going to be about what I did with my second chance. And of course, if there's a single thesis to the lecture, it's live life to the fullest. And that, of course, is a very simple line that you've heard a lot, but I'll try to give it try to put some meat on the bone of that and what it means to me tonight. The first realization I had of my second life was that I was actually quite lucky. Right? I was quite a fortunate person. That was not my perspective prior to the car accident, and you might think that's kind of crazy. So he thinks his life is not very good, then he almost is killed, and he comes out of it thinking, I'm really lucky. But that is exactly how it transpired for me. Before the car accident, I thought, oh my God, I grew up on this farm, as I'll talk about in a little bit. I had to work a lot of hours. I used to watch this show, most of you in here don't know this show, called Leave It to Beaver. I used to watch this show, I'm like, God, that guy has it great, man. The beaver, he just has this fantastic life. He gets cookies and milk when he comes home from school, plays baseball in the street. Oh man, I want that life. So I remember just not appreciating how lucky I was. But what I realized is that I actually had a very lucky first life. So I'm going to talk about my so-called first life before the car accident and how it kind of laid the foundations for my later life and how I realized these things when I was in the hospital. All right, so I grew up on a farm in Chalk Bluff, which is just north of the city of Waco. Chalk Bluff, not too big at all, still to this day, pretty small, but it's much bigger today than it was when I was a kid. We now have a gas station. When I was a kid, we had only a Baptist church. That was it, nothing else. Now we have gas station. We have, depending on the kind of season, maybe 1 or 2 used car lots, and sometimes a beauty salon. That's what Chalk Bluff has, other than a bunch of farms. So it's a very small place. Anyway, I grew up on a farm not too far from the Brazos River in Central Texas. This is my farm, Cedarwood Stables. My family raised horses by the time that I was growing up. This is not a typical picture. I was going through my family photos and I realized that you don't take pictures of like your normal situation. So the photos I have my farm are like when some disaster strikes. So this is actually like the Great Flood, like the 100-year flood. My farm was actually on like the highest point. Now the whole center is flat, prairie, right? But so we're talking about not high, but it's like little tiny blip. But that's where my farm was. It was like the highest point around. So for this amount of water to be on my farm, this was big time. So, but anyway, that's where I grew up. Here's another picture of a couple of the barns also during the Great Flood. I have some other pictures of my farm when it snowed, the one time that it snowed in Texas. But anyway, so I grew up. I want to just say a little bit about the importance of growing up on a farm, which I didn't appreciate when I was younger. I have to say I really just did not want to grow up on a farm. I thought it was terrible. I thought, this was just, don't like this life. I had to get up very early in the morning. We had a bunch of horses to take care of, me and my brother. And so I was always, for most of my time, I had worked a couple of hours at least before going to school in the morning. And when I got home from school, I went immediately to the fields and went to work. And we worked until dark 30, which is, 30 minutes after the sun goes down. We would eat really late. All those people are like, we eat at like 6 o'clock, and that's when the news is on. And I'm like, it was like a foreign world to me. That was like Mars, that you would actually eat it. I thought, we ate at 9. Winter, you might eat a little earlier. But anyway, here's why it was really important to grow up on a farm. I spent a lot of time with my family, my father, right, my mother, my grandmother. I spent, so much time working alongside of them. And that was important. It was really important, I think, for me. I wish that I spent as much time with my family as my family did with me. And it wasn't, sometimes when I'm in the car driving with my kids, and maybe this is the same for you, I ask about how the day went and all this kind of stuff. And, the conversation goes or it doesn't go. It's different if you have something to do. And the kind of conversations that come out of, say, building a barn or building a fence over a few hours are different than the conversations that come out of pick you up at school, drop you off at school, how was your day? It's just different. It's hard to explain, but I think it was really valuable to me. The other thing that was true for me was that I knew I was valuable to my family, right? It's hard to explain, but I used to mock these other children in my school who would talk about their chores. They had to take out the garbage. They had to do this. And I would be like, you have got to be kidding me. This is ridiculous. Does your dad's paycheck get reduced if you don't take out the garbage this week? Woo! I would be like, this is not real work. So, if I didn't feed the horses, or I didn't water the horses, or I didn't move the horses around, somebody else in my family had to do that. Or if I didn't give the horse the medicine, maybe the horse dies, and that impacted the family. It was true of everyone in my family. From an early age, you're contributing to the economic welfare of your family. And I think it's true for folks who have small businesses, restaurants, or things like that. It's not just true for farmers, but it was certainly true for me. And it was subtle. It wasn't like anybody ever said this to me, but my belief is that kind of my inner confidence that look, at core I make mistakes, I'm not perfect, but I'm basically a worthwhile good person, which everybody should have that at their core. I think I got that in part because no matter what happened at school, people said, Carrigan is short, Carrigan is this, whatever. I knew that at the end of the day, I was valuable to my family. And if I didn't show up, that was a big deal. It wasn't like I could just disappear and no one would notice or it wouldn't matter. I think that's a big thing. If you can just disappear and your parents or family don't notice or, it doesn't really matter, I don't know. I think it even unconsciously it filters down. I worry about this because, of course, I don't live on a farm now, and none of these things are true for my family today. But I think it was very valuable to me that I knew that I couldn't do that, and I was valuable in that way. The other thing that I'll say about growing up on a farm is, of course, we have a famous possible presidential candidate who said once upon a time it takes a village. I grew up on a stable, and I would say there's something to this. I learned a lot from all the people who were always on my farm. There was not just my grandmother, my father, my mother. There was workers. There were people who were riding horses, buying horses. There were people who were dropping off hay, or they were buying hay or whatever. And all these people who kind of came into my life kind of through the farm really mattered in different kinds of ways. Sometimes small things that they would say would really matter to me, or just different ways they would see things than the rest of my family did. So that was another valuable thing about growing up where I did. All right, I'm going to talk about all these a little bit in more detail, but I think these are some of the kind of positive values that my family gave to me when I was young, kind of core parts of my character that I think are still with me, and I think they go back to my youth. I want to talk about my grandmother first. My grandmother lived on the same property as us in a different house, but on the same property. She was the kind of matriarch, the most important person on the farm. She pretty much ran everything, and she was a tremendous influence on me. It's really hard to put into words how important she was. I saw her every day. I spent probably more time with her than in some ways with my parents. She was relentlessly optimistic and positive, but she was also demanding. She was the hardest worker of anyone I knew, and it's no accident that my oldest daughter, Julia, is named for her. I'll just give you one story about my grandmother that kind of gives you some clue about the craziness of my life growing up and what I thought was normal. So we were working in a field, as we always did on the weekends. Saturday, Sunday, those were like, I loved Monday. Monday was like my favorite day of the week. Why? Because Monday was back to school. School was air conditioned. School was fantastic. Saturday, Sunday, that was a half day of work, was 12 hours. That's what we did on Saturdays and Sundays. We worked, right, all the time. Luckily for my grandmother, they had 7 a.m. mass. You can get that done, get right to the field. Must have been that clap there. Sorry about that. Yeah. Like over here? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So anyway, so we were working in the field, and my grandma was working in a different field, and we had multiple tractors. One of the tractors, not the one that she was on in the picture, she was on that tractor, and there was no power steering back in the 1970s, and she was turning the tractor wheel, and she slipped. And when you're turning the tractor really hard, and there's no power steering, and it slips, it whips back, and it whipped back, and it broke her arm. And she drove down in the car to where we were working in the field, and she showed us her broken arm, and she said, I broke my arm on the tractor. I'm going to drive myself to the hospital. I'll be back by dinner. And none of us thought that was strange. We thought, well, that's the way it goes. Now, of course, you understand that we go over to Chalk Bluff, and the hospital was like 20 miles away. And she's off. We don't even think about it. She comes back with the cast, and we're just like having dinner like normal. And only later, years later, did I realize, you're in a really strange family. You're in a real strange. This is not normal. Most people, this is not how they would have their grandmother broke their arm. This is not how they would respond to it. But we were just like, we got to get work done. How are we going to work to dark 30 if we're taking people to the hospital? Only one person can drive at a time. Her foot's good, so she's fine. One arm. I don't even know how it happened, but I'm telling you, it's this true story. You can ask even my family, that happened. I can tell you many more, but that's just one. Let me talk about my brother. This is the person who I spent the most time growing up with. We did everything together. When I was talking about getting up very early, for a long time we both got up and both did it. And we came up with this great idea where instead of getting up at 5:30 every morning, every other morning we would get up at 4:30 and we would do all the work ourselves so the other person could sleep all the way to 7:30. So me and my brother kind of worked this thing out. So we did all kind of things. We worked together. We shared all the stuff together. Now, of course, we're only a couple of years younger than me. We had epic fights. One of the kind of most famous times we were swinging 2x4s with nails in the end of them at each other, trying to kill each other. This is all like way away from our parents. They have no idea. But anyway, so we had a strained relationship as most brothers do. My own two daughters and their sibling fights. Sometimes, of course, I see that as punishment for my torturing of my younger brother. But of course, looking back now, there's nothing more important than me having a brother. We did all this stuff together. No one, not even my wife, we've been married for 20 years, knows me in some ways as well as my brother does. I cherish our relationship, and I'm very happy to say it's a strong relationship today, stronger than ever. We're gonna see each other later on this month in Orlando. My father, he was and is still a great influence on me. It was his example more than his words that I followed as a boy. He never really kind of explicitly said, you should do this or you should do this, son. But he lived his life in a way that I admired. I always admired my father. I thought he was just a good person and the kind of person that you would want to be. One of the things that he did was he always saw the best sides in other people. Sometimes it's very easy to see the flaws in people. It's sometimes harder to see the best sides. And I mean, we had some folks that he knew that worked on our farm or other people in our town. And I just say that, he was amazing in being able to see the best sides of people at times. He was a hard worker, just like his mother. He never asked you to work more than he did, right? If you worked from dawn to dusk on Saturday, he was up an hour before dawn, and he came in last from the fields every single time. Never asked you to do more than he did himself. So that's my father. My mother was in some ways a more direct and important influence in some ways on me when I was young. More so than my other family members, she actually engaged in conversations with me, intellectual conversations, gave me explicit advice on how to be a good person and things I would like. Things I consider very core to who I am today. My love of reading, my love of music are directly tied to her. She loves to read, or she had lots of books in my house. No one else in my family, even really to this day, really loves to read. They read more now than they did when I was younger, but she was the only person who really liked to read. I liked to read, so that was important to me. She also paid attention to kind of my growth and development as I was changing and getting older in a way that, I love my father. He was kind of oblivious to this kind of stuff. And I remember when I was getting into music in a big way, she took the time, and we were very busy, to introduce me to Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen, and that's music that I still love to this day. Now, of course, there's people beyond the family that had a great influence on me, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about them. This is Rick Lowe. He was one of the most important teachers I ever had. He was my theater arts teacher, my drama teacher. That was one of probably the most important things to me when I was a teenager, was being in drama, and being comfortable and speaking in front of people is directly traceable to kind of what he taught me, and I always cherish all of my interactions with Mr. Lowe. Mike Stark is a special person in my life. He actually lived with my grandmother on our farm, and I kind of consider him to be kind of like an uncle. He's a mentor. He's a lot to me. He actually had dropped out of high school, had worked his way back, got his GED, then worked his way through undergraduate, then worked his way and got a master's degree. And no one else in my family, had a graduate degree. He also loved history, and he eventually became a professor at a county college, community college. I have very fond memories when I was really young, before I was young to really work a lot. I would, while he was working, I would go and I would crawl up to the top of the stalls, like these horse stalls we had, where he would be cleaning the horse stall, and I would sit on the top of the horse stall, and he would tell me stories about sometimes history, sometimes all kind of things. He would just make it up. He talked about superheroes, talked about the Lone Ranger. He would just make up these stories, and it probably helped him pass the time. But for me as a kid, it was just fantastic things that happened. Barry Hankins, he was my basketball coach and my social studies teacher. He also went on to become a college professor, teaches at Baylor now. A very influential person for me as well. So all in all, one of the things that I realized when I was in the hospital as I reflected on all this is how lucky I had been. I had all these great influences, all these things that were really advantages to me, and I just hadn't appreciated them. It took something traumatic, my near death, to really drive home that I was in fact an incredibly lucky person. It's sad that sometimes it takes that, but that's what it took in my case. And of course, I would never have done it if it hadn't been for the time and quiet. My brother, who was also, of course, traumatically injured, I feel like he was robbed of some of the best aspects of it because he had a brain injury, and although he completely recovered, it was very sad for a long period of time. We didn't know he was going to recover. I mean, he was completely comatose, and then for about 6 months, he was semi-comatose, and it's hard to explain it, but I would say his free will was gone. Like, he was up, walking. If you asked him stuff, he would say yes or no. If you told him to go to the restroom, he would go to the restroom. He probably wouldn't go to the restroom unless you asked him to go to the restroom. He would eat things, but it would just be like he would eat like from one spot and he would just work his way around. He wouldn't like mix and match, and he ate things that he never ate before. Anyway, it was crazy, and it was really worrisome, of course. But then one day, after about 6 months, the doctor just said, you have to let the brain heal. And 1 month or 6 months, he just said, I want ice cream. That was the first thing that he had actually said that wasn't a response to anything. And then after that, he just kind of came out of it. He went on, he got an engineering degree from A&M, philosophy degree, a master's in philosophy from A&M, and he's a civil engineer in Houston, and He's doing great with no lingering effects at all, but he doesn't remember anything. In fact, he doesn't even remember, like, after he came out of it. He doesn't remember, like, 9 months of his life. Just gone. Doesn't remember, like, months before it happened is gone. Like, and then, like, months after are gone. He just doesn't remember, like, almost a whole year of his life. He didn't have any of this reflection time that I had, because my injuries were physical, his was mental, and I feel like that I benefited a lot from that. All right, so what did I decide to do? In addition to kind of realizing that I had a lucky life, I also decided I wanted to do things with this second chance, with the rest of my life. And one of the things I decided I wanted to do was to see the world. Chalk Bluff was great. I recommend it. But Chalk Bluff is not it's not everything in the world. And I knew that, and I really wanted to travel and see part of the world. And I wanted, of course, to do all these things quickly, because if you know after you have your last rites read to you that you never know when it could be your last day. And so I wanted to do things quickly. So I didn't just say, okay, I'll see the world at some point. I worked it out, and I think my family was very supportive. So 1988, the year after my car accident, I mean, it took me like a year to be able to completely walk from the car accident, which was in February 87. Summer of 1988, I go to West Germany with an exchange program in high school. I don't think I would have done it at all if it hadn't been for the car accident, but it was one of the most important kind of parts of my life. If you go to another country, you live in another country, there's nothing that beats that for seeing the world in new ways. Of course, as an historian, most people today, like kids today, have no idea that there used to be a West Germany and East Germany. I was there in West Germany. This is my friend Lutz. He's the one who was exchanged with. He came to Texas, stayed with me. I went to Germany, stayed with him. This is us meeting, I guess, last year, maybe 2 years ago, with his family. We're still friends after all of these years. Pretty important thing, and that was something that it was kind of an example of what I wanted to do. I wanted to act on these things. I didn't want to just wait and see how it would come. Do things, do it. 1989, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, which had a fantastic time. The 4 best years of my life were as an undergraduate. One of the other things that I did was I left engineering. I started off as an engineering major. Why? Because I was good at math. My father was an engineer, and grandfather was an engineer. My brother, of course, obviously became an engineer. But it wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. It was I was a mechanical engineering major, mechanical engineering class. We were supposed to design a solar-powered car. Everyone else thought this was like the greatest thing in the world. I had no interest in a solar-powered car. I was supposed to have an assignment. What was my contribution? I said paint it red. That's all I came up with. And it was just not. It was not for me. So I ended up taking things that I just liked. Philosophy and history. Those are the 2 subjects that I liked the most. And probably I really liked philosophy even more than history when I was an undergraduate. I loved my philosophy classes, but the philosophy that I liked the most was ancient philosophy. And it was made clear to me that was very challenging. You needed to know Greek, Latin, German, French at a bare minimum. And those were tough languages. I had a hard time with Spanish. There was a great time in my Spanish class where the professor was asking me, asking the class, to name an animal in the zoo. I had no idea what the question was. And so I was like, uno? And that was clearly not the right answer. And then he asked again, like, si? And the whole class was breaking down. So my Spanish skills, which I still use my Spanish, but my daughter, 6th grade, she already has better Spanish than I probably ever did. Okay, so I changed majors. Once again, it was a decision that I didn't wait long. 1 semester at engineering was all that it was for me, and I was like, that's it, I'm out. Moved to philosophy and engineering. These are a bunch of the professors that really made a difference in my life. I won't go through them all because I know of time. This is Robert Solomon, who's a great philosophy professor who's taught existentialism. Wilma Corkerdale was a historian. Charters Wynn, who taught me Stalinism. This is James Sidbury, who's taught a course on American slavery. Michael Stauffer was my honors coordinator, is great. And Marty Lamar, who I'm still friends with, taught Latin American history. Richard Graham, I don't have a photograph of Richard Graham. Richard Graham was incredibly important to me as well because of the time and attention he took to look at my writing. Fantastic. I had so many professors that helped me, and I hope that all of you who are undergraduates and those of you who will be undergraduates will take advantage of the wonderful people that you encountered in your college years. This is the second most important person that I met at UT Austin, George C. Wright. He taught African American history and American history. He was a fantastic lecturer, something that doesn't happen for me. This is the greatest honor I've ever had as a teacher. Every single class at Texas that he taught, he got a standing ovation at the end of his last lecture. He's fantastic. He's going to be the keynote speaker for President's Day. I'm bringing him here February 17th. I hope you can come see him. His talk will be the significance of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In any event, he was really important to me because I ended up doing my senior thesis with him. He said, you should study lynching. And I'm like, okay, lynching, that sounds interesting. Well, of course, those of you who know me know I've now done 4 books on lynching. This is the guy who said I should study lynching right here. This, of course, is the most important person that I met at UT Austin. That's my wife, Emily Blank. We met as freshmen and began dating as freshmen and got married shortly after we graduated. Once again, I don't know if this would have happened. I know most people today don't get married right out of college. Some do, but most don't. I don't know if I would have been ready for this if I had not had the car accident. But I said, when I meet the right person, just go. You meet your best friend, just go. And so I didn't hem and haw, and it was great. It has been a fantastic marriage. It still is a fantastic marriage. She's my life partner, and she likes cats. So I decided to do this for her. One of the things that we did together, of course, you want to mix your dreams together, is travels. And so one of the things that we have done consistently and still do is travel everywhere. We traveled all the time when we were undergraduates and all kind of breaks. This is us going to the Grand Canyon during a Christmas break. It was a very dangerous, stupid thing to do. The Grand Canyon is not actually meant to be hiked in winter when it's got a lot of snow on it. And in fact, there was no one else hiking it except for us. And indeed, in retrospect, we could have died. But it was a lot of fun. And once you drive to the Grand Canyon from Texas, you're not just like, well, it's too snowy. So you're like, we're going. So anyway, here we are, risky life and limb, hiking in the Grand Canyon. Is fantastic. This is our trip to Europe. We saved all kind of money, and we had a fantastic, my favorite trip. We still ever take with our summer trip to Europe. We had just some fantastic memories. Did it on a shoestring, and it'll never be surpassed in my mind for that trip that we did. Here's me, and you can just tell a little bit of my long hair. You can't really see the full thing if it was really out. But so anyway, that's when I had long hair in college, and here I am at the Vatican. The Pope did not throw me out, despite my grandmother was sure that he was going to. He was like, well, the Pope sees that, it'll be all over for you in the long hair. She did not like my long hair, but anyway, here we are, a little bit older, whitewater rafting. We like to drive. We drive all over the United States before we had kids, after we have kids, right when they were born. It didn't stop us. We drive. Every year we drive to Texas. We sometimes add Wyoming as a little side trek from Texas. We drive to Florida. We drive. We love to drive. Traveling is something that we love to do. This March for spring break, we're going to Mexico City, and I'm very excited about that. Of course, the other one of my dreams was to have a family. Here we are in Christmas 2009. We thought that was a snowy Christmas. We thought that was a lot of snow, but this year is like, whoosh, boom, 2009, you don't have anything on us. So, but here's my family, which has obviously been a great joy to me. Here are my 2 daughters. They're here in the front row, Sarah and Julia. Here's a couple more pictures of Sarah. I have to throw a few in. She likes to play soccer. She likes fashion. She likes all kind of different things. She's a wonderful, wonderful kid. This is my older daughter, Julia. Julia loves to read. She's at a basketball game today. I can't say enough about my children. They're perfect, they're wonderful, they bring me joy, they're everything to me. We're spending some family time. This is us at Disney. We're actually going to Disney again. I have a conference in Orlando, but it's actually, first idea was we'll do Disney along with the conference. Now it's like the conference is like the tiny part, and Disney is big. But anyway, that's we're going there again. This is us playing board games. We love to play board games. It's probably my favorite hobby that I have, and this is I play with a lot of folks, a lot of friends, but also, of course, my family. This is us playing with some cousins, a game called Dixit. Now, my other dream was to become a writer. Now, when I was a kid, I probably wanted to become a comic book writer. That's probably what I wanted to do. I read comic books, loved comic books. I wanted to write comic books. That dream did not happen. And it was one of the things that you can have a lot of dreams. My daughter has a dream of time traveling. I'm like, I don't know about that one. That might not happen. That's a tough one. Maybe you can write a book about time travel. How about that? But in any event, I wanted to write comic books. That didn't really happen. Those are some of my favorite comic books right there. But I did actually become a different kind of writer, and one of the ways I did that is I went to graduate school at Rowan University, where I got my master's and my doctorate. These are some of the professors who had a tremendous influence. Dan Carter is my advisor. I went to work with him. Dan Carter is he's a genius. He's a fantastic writer. Those of you who had me before know that I'm very proud of the fact that his dissertation was published without revision as a book. Now, that's impressive right there, but that's not even close. It won the Bancroft Prize for Best Book in American History that year. If that wasn't impressive enough, it also won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best Mystery of the Year. There has been one doctoral dissertation that has won Best Mystery of the Year, and that's it. That's it. He's a fantastic writer. He's gone on to do documentary work. He's won an Emmy. He's done all kinds of different things with documentary work. I am not as good a writer as Dan Carter, and most people are not. He's fantastic, but I learned tremendous amounts from him. This is Eugene Genovese, who was one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. He was a Marxist when I met him initially. He became a Pat Buchanan supporter. He's an interesting kind of guy. Susan Sokolow is our Latin Americanist. Learned a lot from her. And James Rourke, who is James Rourke is a gentleman scholar. He more than even Dan Carter, who I wanted to be but could not be because not everyone can be that great a writer. He was the person I really wanted to be like. I thought the way that he treated people with dignity, with respect, he always seemed to make you feel like he had, tremendous time for you. I know I don't do this as well as he does, but I love Jim Rourke, and I want to be like Jim Rourke as a professor. In any event, great times at Emory, and out of that I received the training that allowed me to write. My first book, The Making of a Lynching Culture, was my doctoral dissertation, an edited collection, and then the book here in the center, my most recent book. Some of you came to my book signing, Forgotten Dead. It's about the lynching of Mexicans in the United States. It's not comic book stuff at all, but I'm very happy that I have published work, which I think is significant. I think it's made a contribution to knowledge. I think that when I do finally give my last lecture and I die, that these books will be in the library, will be, electronic copies, digital copies you can get as well, and people will be reading these, I think, for a long time. There'll be resources, at least for historians, long after I'm gone, and that's something that's really quite meaningful to me. In fact, I'll just say something about my friend and co-author, Clive Webb, who wrote Forgotten Dead with me. Probably no one besides my wife has helped me achieve more of my dreams in the last 15 years than Clive. We have traveled, like with Emily. Clive and I traveled all over. The reason why we're going to Mexico City is because Clive and I went to Mexico City, had a fantastic time there, and I wanted to take Emily. We traveled all over California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, doing research for our book. I love traveling with Clive. This is us. I was his best man at his wedding, and so that's from where this photo is from. And you'll hear more from Clive later. One of my other dreams was to have a different kind of appearance in my hometown paper. So the first time I was in the paper, I was almost dead. Now, this is not how I thought my return. I was like, I'm going to make a name for myself, and I'm going to be in the newspaper. And I am going to, it's not, my last memory of me in the newspaper will not be of the car accident. And we get this. Those of you who are astute have figured out there's something wrong with this. Carrigan, who is black. I am not passing for white. I am actually white, of Irish descent. How did this happen, you might say? Normally, you don't put race in a newspaper story. I mean, I know there's some people here in the audience who write newspaper stories. You don't usually say, Barack Obama, who is black, today spoke about economic policy. Doesn't happen. LeBron James, who is black, today scored 32 points. It doesn't happen. So well, how did this happen? Okay, well, I was being interviewed on the phone about race relations in Waco. And I was saying some things like, I think white people have treated black people kind of badly. I think lynching is on the whole not a good thing. And the person was like, this guy is really radical. He's out there. I don't think he's a white guy. He sounds like a white guy. I don't think he really is a white guy because he's so anti-lynching. The other thing which really threw the reporter off was that I was teaching at Spelman College at the time. It was my first job. I was at Spelman College. Spelman College was known as an all-black, all-female school. And they were like, guy thinks lynching's bad, teaching at an all-black school. He's definitely black. So now, the next question is, why did you decide to put this in to the newspaper story? Like, we need to provide some context to explain this craziness. We got to tell people that he's black. I don't, anyway, so I would just say a brief thing. Teaching at Spelman College was a fantastic experience. It really also, I don't know where it would be on my list of influential moments, but I wanted to include it somehow because it really did make a difference to me. You know, I was never treated anything except for very politely by everybody at Spelman. But there wasn't ever a single moment of any of my time at Spelman when I didn't realize I was different, right? There were some white women there, and there were a lot of black men too, security guards, all kind of, you know, some students from Morehouse who would come over, mostly black women, but there was very few white guys. And I remember, like, there would be a white guy who would put like candy bars in the machine. I'd be like, hey, white guy, oh yeah. And I would be like, and that would never happen to me. And the rest of the rest of my life, I would never be like, well, there's a guy who's putting candy in, we're brothers. But it would happen at Spelman. And it wouldn't be like a conscious thing. It would just be, it's hard to explain unless you live in that environment to really get it. Now, here's the thing. What would it be if you were a real minority? And like with me, and I left Spelman at 5 o'clock, I would go, guess what, Dan Rather, and everybody else is white. It was a white world except it was Spelman, right? But I still felt that way. So anyway, it was really important for me. I feel I learned a lot there at Spelman. This is my third appearance in the paper, and they got it right. This is the front page of the newspaper this time. They didn't say that I was black. This was about my first book. When my first book came out a little bit after that, they did a story on the lynching that was kind of the starting point for my book. And so finally, that part of another one of my dreams was realized in my hometown newspaper. All right, in fact, in many ways, I have surpassed my dreams. So, you know, I dreamed of doing comic books. I then maybe dreamed of publishing my dissertation. But I've now had my research cited in the New York Times and Washington Post this year. I was on NPR and The Nation. I didn't dream of this when I was in the hospital in Waco. And this is Junot Diaz, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist. And in fact, like he starts like his most famous book with like quoting Galactus. That's cool. Because you don't know who Galactus is, you should know. Anyway, this is what he said about my book. I thought it was a monumental act of recovery. Forgotten Dead returns to light the long-erased Mexican victims of America's lynching violence. Absolutely essential reading for those wishing to better understand the wider spectrum of American racial violence. That's beyond even what I thought I might be able to do. All right, so I was supposed to give advice. Randy Pausch gave advice at the end of the lecture, so that's kind of like the end of like my life story and achieving my dreams. But I was supposed to give some advice to you, how to live your life. So Randy, I'm going to do that in the end of this little part here. So one of the things that Randy Pausch said is you need to decide if you're Tigger or Eeyore. I agree with this. Not everyone can choose. My friend Clive, I'll talk about in a second, he's an Eeyore. There's nothing he can do about it. He is a full-on Eeyore. At his wedding, I said, some people believe the glass is half full, and some believe it's half empty. I'm a half full person. Clive is half empty, and it's laced with arsenic. Okay? He's very pessimistic about things. Eeyore is positive and an upbeat character compared to Clive. But Tigger, if you can be Tigger, you should be Tigger, right? Tigger, even though Tigger bounces into trouble sometimes, he's exploring, he's getting out, he's experiencing life, he's happy. You should try to be Tigger if you possibly can. I try to be Tigger too. Spock or Kirk, another critical distinction. You need to figure out which one of these folks that you should be. When I take tests, unfortunately, they tell me I'm Spock. But really, I want to be Kirk. Everyone should be Kirk. Kirk has fun. You should try to be Kirk. And I'm going to try now to play a little song from Bob Schneider about how you should be Kirk.
Captain Kirk, get up every day, love to go to work. Don't wanna be like Mr. Spock, I wanna kick out the jams and rock the block. I just wanna feel good.
Well, sorry about that. There we go. Moving on to Steve Jobs, another person. Of course, I'm an Apple person, for those of you who know me. I love Apple. And Steve Jobs, I don't know if I could work for him, but I admire Steve Jobs a lot. And he said something that's similar to what I believe, some advice I want to give. You need to find what you love, and that is true both for your work and relationships. And I believe this. Find something that you love and figure out a way to make a career out of it. Don't pick a career and hope you'll figure out a way to love it. Now, this is advice that you can take too far. Like, for example, let's say, you decide you really love professional basketball, which I do love professional basketball. I like basketball. Unfortunately, that was not really going to happen for me. No matter how much I worked hard on that career, that wasn't going to happen. Maybe you love playing video games. I don't know if that's going to work out for you as a career. But maybe you can find some other ways to make this happen. You definitely should try as hard as you can to find that thing you love and figure out a way to make a living out of it. Don't look at the reports it looks like nurses or this, or it looks like this, that. Pick out something that you love, and then everything's changing anyway. All right. Another critical cultural influence for me was Yoda. This is my favorite movie, Star Wars. Came out when I was 6, 7 years old. I saw it lots of times. I love Star Wars. I love Yoda. Of course, one of Yoda's famous things is do or do not. There is no try. What this means to me is there is no such thing as trying without doing. Right? The only way you can figure out if you actually want to do something, might want to do something, is to actually do it. And I'm talking about dive into it, really try it. Don't just dabble with it. Really dive into it. All right, and I know time's running out, but you guys are also going to get a little clip of Yoda. Another advice I would give you is to learn from your classmates and your friends before college, during college, after college. Interactions that I have with those folks, it's just so important. Obviously, I'm a college professor. I think that what happens inside the classroom is really important. But what happens outside of the classroom, the conversations you have with your peers, they can be just as important as what happens inside the classroom. And if you take those relationships seriously, you try to learn from your friends, I think you'll be a better person over your life. And I won't go through all of these folks. Some of them, at least one of them, is here tonight, and I appreciate deeply my friendship with all of those folks. I'll give you some advice from my grandmother. She told me the only person who can make you unhappy is you. This is usually when she was beating my butt with a fly swatter because I had done something wrong. But I really did, and I do believe this, that you can control you. And I try to act on this as much as I possibly can. When bad things happen, I remember my grandmother's advice. I told you I would return to my friend Clive. Clive says that this was something he uses for his own health. When something bad happens, stop and ask yourself, will this still bother me in a year's time? Now, this does not work with some things. If your brother develops cancer, this is still going to matter in a year. And that's good, because these little sayings and things, if they're just so general that they pass every test, like live life to the fullest without any depth to it, it's not really valuable. This one is not like that, because some things still do matter, and you should, and you have to, in fact, care about those things. But a lot of things that bother you will not bother you in a year. If your plane is delayed 8 hours, that's frustrating at the moment. In a year, you'll have forgotten most things about it, right? It'll be a good story or something else. So this is something that I use a lot myself when I find myself getting frustrated. It's amazing how often it works. This is another one of my childhood heroes, Willie Nelson. He grew up very close to where I grew up, north of Chalk Bluff in Abbott. And this is a song that he sang, written by Beth Nelson Chapman. And what it says to me is you can't do anything about yesterday, but you can always do something about today. I'll just play a little tiny clip from this. Maybe. Maybe not.
But that's a waste of time and tears.
Oh no, Willie. We're gonna go back to Willie. I gotta have Willie. I can't not have Willie. All right, sorry about that. We're gonna have.
Say goodnight. I could cry for the time I wasted, but that's a waste of time and tears. And I know just what I'd change if I went back in time somehow. But there's nothing I can do about it.
All right, so if my daughter succeeds in time traveling, that won't be true. But until that happens, you can't do anything about yesterday. And doesn't mean that you shouldn't, look back and say, yeah, I would have done that differently, and I'll do that differently in the future. But you got to stop worrying about things that you can't change. Probably, of course, the most important advice I ever got in my life was from Mike Stark, who told me to buckle your seatbelt. Now, I had to get the setting for this, because a lot of you are too young to remember this, but it used to be not required to wear seatbelts. That was not part of the law. When I was a kid, that was not. No one in my family, except for Mike Stark, used seatbelts. What Mike had to do when he was ever in one of our trucks was he had to dig in the seat cushions and pull out crusty, dirty seatbelts and put them on himself and us. He was the only person who did it. Whenever we weren't in the truck with him, no one had seatbelts. No one. You'd read on the paper, somebody fell out of their car, got run over. Didn't even think about it. Like, well, seatbelt? That's an infringement on freedom. No way. There's no way. Only Mike Stark was like big into the seatbelt thing. And we were in the truck one day, my brother and I were all in the front, in the truck. We were going on, and another truck pulled out in front of us. And we hit the truck. And because we had the seatbelts on, we just went, nothing happened. But normally, like, when there's no seatbelt on, I would, like, standing up in the truck and all that. I would, boom, I would smash my face. And I realized this seatbelt thing is kind of important. So I became the second person in my family to believe in seatbelts. And then when my car accident happened, I had a seatbelt on. And I was told multiple times that if I did not have my seatbelt, I definitely would have been dead. So that advice saved my life. All right. There's one more picture of the car accident that almost killed me. All right, now final thoughts. Just a few things here. Cultivate empathy and ignore guilt. These are seemingly different things, but I want to explain to you how I think they work together. No ability is more important, in my opinion, than the ability to see the world from the perspective of others, right? To imagine their world. But the point of this is not to understand it so that then you sacrifice your own self for these others. But the point is to understand how you can pursue your dreams, your self-interest, in a way that might not impinge upon others, right? Achieving your dreams, can you imagine doing it without interrupting others as much as possible? I think most of us really cannot put others really truly ahead of ourselves, our own families. Like, I don't think I can put, I'm sorry, I might love everyone in this room, but I can't put you ahead of my daughters, right? It just, when it comes down to it, you're going to lose in that one, right? I'm sorry, this is going to happen. I don't think it's possible for most of us to do that. But I want you to try to figure out a way to achieve your dreams in a way that allows others to achieve dreams. And I feel I'm very lucky. I'm hoping that I'm doing that a little bit tonight, and I feel like I hope I do that most of the time with my job. My dream of helping others and living my life and becoming a writer, I hope, is an influence on other people to help them achieve their dreams, which may be getting a college education, becoming a high school teacher, becoming someone who works in the archives at a historical society or museum. I love that part of my job, and if you can do that, I think you'll be ahead. Some of you know that I'm a Quaker. This is George Fox, the founder of Quakerism. I'm very, very happy with my faith. My grandmother, rest her soul, is not happy with my decision, but I am happy. This is one thing that George Fox said. He said, we should be patterns, be examples in all countries, places, islands, nations, wherever you come, that your carriage in life may preach among all sorts of people, and to them, then you will come to walk cheerfully over the world. And I believe that's exactly how you should live. Another way to say the same thing, maybe, work hard, play hard, make the most of your life. Don't waste your time that you have. All of it's precious. Play hard, whether it's on the court, at the table, or even in front of the TV. Don't waste your time. There's so much great television. You can watch really brain-melting television. It's so good right now. Even if you're watching television, don't watch Jersey Shore. I know you guys like Jersey Shore. Don't watch Duck Dynasty. Watch something that actually challenges your brain. So much good stuff. Work hard all the time. Work hard at school. Work hard at work. Work hard on your dreams. Finally, you might have thought this was all for my students and students at Rowan, and in some ways it was, but when I was writing it, the whole time I said, what do I want to tell Julia and Sarah about how to live their life? So this is really for you. Thank you very much. Thank you.